I'm Margo Griffith, and I'm the Head of Business Development for Edalex. And thank you so much for having us to really talk about our journey so far with openRSD and with RSDs in particular in the Australian context. And I will pass you over to Melinda to introduce herself as well, because we are a team event this morning.
Thanks, Margo. Yes, we are a team event as usual. My name is Melinda O'Halloran. I'm the Project Manager and Business Analyst at Edalex, and I'll be giving some colour to some of the things Margo talks about with regards to our RSD platform and what we've been doing.
Lovely. So if we could go through the slides. Thanks, Christian. So a little bit about Edalex. We are an Australian edtech company. We've been around for just over 6 years, and we have 3 products. OpenEquella, which is our more established product, and the one that does have some influence. So I'll tell you a bit about that product as well as the others. OpenEquella is a digital content repository. It was started a couple of decades ago, actually, in Tasmania. It was bought by Pearson for a while, and then 6.5 years ago turned open source. And so we manage and service and develop and even host on occasion that particular product globally. And it's an important product because it influenced our newest product, openRSD. Credentialate is, I guess, one of our newer products as well. It's been around for about 3 years. Think of Credentialate as a skills infrastructure between your curriculum and the recognition. And so we connect the skills dots for you in between your curriculum and recognition. And openRSD, which is the one we're going to concentrate on today and was informed by our collaborative projects earlier on in the year with OSN. So we're super excited to tell you about that. Thanks, Christian. Next slide. Just wanted to set the context of each of those products within a very oversimplified diagram that some of you may or may not have seen before. But this is kind of how we see the skills recognition continuum. And you can see there we have mapped our products to kind of where they fit within that continuum. I won't go on and belabor the point there because everyone on this call is acutely aware of that one. But just as a visual, OpenEquella and openRSD is sort of more around on the curriculum side of things. Credentialate, as I said, is that infrastructure connecting the curriculum to recognition. Next one, Christian. So our 2 collaborative projects, and we were extremely excited to actually be involved in both projects earlier on in the year. The first one was with our wonderful partners, the Education Design Lab and the University of Melbourne. Melinda's going to go into a bit more detail around the actual project itself and some of our initial, I guess, goals and what we actually ended up doing, which was way broader and way more complex, but it was super exciting. So what we wanted to do and what we started out doing was leveraging existing Rich Skill Descriptor libraries from Education Design Labs. And working with our partner University of Melbourne to implement those within a system, which is our Credentialate system, for their Melbourne microsets. That was basically the project. The other one, which we were involved with peripherally, was with Dr. Mark Keogh, and he was looking at basically trialing a model for classifying and recording and mapping and even recognizing informal learning using RSDs. And he used Credentialate to do that as well. So next slide, thanks, Christian. And so out of that, openRSD was born, essentially. When we started thinking about and getting into RSDs more, we were working through some of the little bumps, particularly when it came to OSMIT. And those little bumps were around being able to use international taxonomies within the context of RSDs, and we discovered that we actually couldn't change some of the fields. So we started thinking around what we could do, and that's when openEquella came into play. we did realize that sitting in our toolset was an open source digital content repository whose sole job it was to manage complex metadata. And from that little light bulb moment, we were like, okay, well, maybe we can take the incredible work of OSMIT, also an open source platform, and see what we can do with that to create a platform that was a little bit more flexible and a little bit more, I guess, fit for purpose for the international context and our regional requirements. Again, I won't say much about that because Melinda is going to go on and take you on a bit of a deep dive with that. Yeah, thanks, Christian. Next one. This is just a quick flash up to say it's real, it's here. We launched in May, and you can see there already we've uploaded quite a number of skills libraries within there. I'm hoping that one actually reflects all of the Western Governors University release for their RSD libraries. We did that just recently. And just before I move on, can I just say none of this would have been possible without the incredible support of Western Governors University and the OSN Collaborative and Network. It really, really has just been a fabulous thing to be involved with. So if any of you are on the call and are thinking about it, please do it. It's a wonderful, wonderful experience. Thank you, Christian. Next slide. Just want to highlight that in our little journey around openRSDs and the launch, it became acutely obvious to us that we needed to create some resources to actually explain what they were, why they were important, and really in the Australian context, what it could mean for us. And so you're more than welcome to hop over to YouTube and to our website, and all of those, both the launch video and also the resources are all there freely available. And I do believe it's, we're incredibly flattered that some of those resources have made it onto the OSN Community Collaborative site as well. Thanks, Christian. Right, so I just want to really set the macro scene for Australia, and I'm very conscious of time, so I'll go through this quickly because we wanted to set the scene about the why of why we started down the road of openRSD. And then Melinda will get into the what we actually built. So the Australian opportunity for RSDs is actually immediate. It's hotting up. Skills are a very hot topic down here at the moment. But it's important for us because we have a 40-year rich history of skills already in Australia through our Australian Qualifications Training Framework. And that's our vocational training framework. It's set up through training packages. It's then broken down into units of competency. And in those units of competency, there are multiple elements that make up that competency. It's a skills treasure trove, but it's trapped in the vocational sector right now. And so one of the thoughts that we had was, what if we could unlock all of that skills data and actually make it useful and have utility, not just in the vocational sector, but also in higher education, K-12, right? Across the board, corporate. There's also been a lot of recent work from the National Skills Commission on the Australian Skills Classification System. Again, a huge body of work. At the moment, and this is absolutely not a criticism, but at the moment, it's not useful in a machine readable way. We want also to unlock some of that data and make that useful across sectors. So they're two of the bodies of work that we're looking to see if we can translate that into RSDs. The other thing in Australia is there is a sector-wide call for reform, right? We have a wonderful system, decades old, but it really does need a reset. And I think that there is general understanding that that reset needs to happen. We also have, like globally, the skills gap. And there's hyper attention around that at the moment because of our recent change in government. To the point where at the beginning of September, we have a national job and skills summit that has been set by the new government. So everything in Australia is ripe for this skills conversation, and we are front and centre in that conversation. Thank you, Christian. The other macro challenges that are happening within Australia is we face the same that you do, right? You know, there is systemic inertia that decades worth of wonderful work is very hard to peel back. And in fact, you know, you don't need to be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We just need to look at what information that we do have and how we can actually tweak that for the digital future, frankly. The macro changes for us are also the change at the government level. We've had a shift of government, and so far that's been a positive thing. Skills-based hiring, is that a thing? It's not really in Australia, not yet. That conversation is not really happening. And so, of course, as you know, the ecosystem is going to depend upon, you know, both sides of the coin. Skills-based, you know, education, but also the skills-based hiring, and that conversation is still very, very nascent. We have access, diversity, and inclusion issues at a deep level, as I think globally everyone does, and we're looking to address that. One of the things that we have too, which is important for our economic development, is the skills migration program, and these things called the skilled occupation lists, which the National Skills Commission review very regularly. And so we feel that RSDs do have a huge part to play in defining skills, and particularly defining skills for migration, and then defining skills for our economy, which desperately depends upon that skilled migration policy. Thanks, Christian. I think I have spoken enough, and I may turn the mic over to Melinda to take you through the what. So over to you, Melinda.
Thanks, Margo, and good morning and good afternoon, everyone. So I've titled this slide RSDs in the real world, and it comes from a couple of things that Margo said, and that is, we did the wonderful collaborative project. We learned so much. And now what? So how do we apply our RSDs is really the question that we asked ourselves. When we commenced the Skills Collaborative, I personally had an idea about RSDs. They were a data structure of some type, but I didn't know much else. At the conclusion of the Skills Collaborative, the Edalex and University of Melbourne team, with the wisdom and help of EDL, so Education Design Lab, and WGU, who Margo's spoken about, we worked with their skills architects. And by the end of the collaborative, we'd learnt enough to create an RSD collection and build an RSD contribution and hosting platform, which was openRSD. So we learnt a lot through the process and the course of a very short few months. But during the course of our collaborative project work, we were obviously thinking, what next? How can we apply our learnings to real world scenarios? University of Melbourne, with their wonderful RSD collection that they were creating, were wondering how they might use those RSDs in the delivery of their Melbourne micro certs and possibly other academic courses. They have since progressed to aligning RSDs from both their own collection and other publicly available collections to the learning outcomes of 2 Melbourne microcerts, which is amazing work. And the RSD links appear on the learner evidence record issued with their microcert badge to the students who've completed and passed the course. So that's wonderful progress. But there was more for them. During the creation of their first RSD collection, the University of Melbourne team discovered that there were several incidental benefits of the RSD process, and this is what they're now advocating. Things such as crafting RSDs provided the opportunity to look at what skills are being developed and enhanced in their programs. Aligning RSDs to their programs provided greater contextualization to what is being learned in the course. Identifying the alignments for the RSD metadata provided an opportunity to connect programs with skills frameworks. And that's a really big one because that was something that hadn't been explored before. And we've got loads of skills frameworks in Australia. The process of making judgments on whether to align to an existing RSD from another library, such as WGU's amazing collections, or create a specific RSD, a bespoke RSD that you might need, really provided their learning designers and teachers with a deeper knowledge of skills metadata and skills alignment. So RSDs being full of metadata, when you deep dive into that and you start to craft that, you get a really good understanding of what makes up a skill. And of course, designing and implementing RSDs allowed the University of Melbourne to explore the scalability of skills uplift in their Melbourne microcert. So now they have a way forward as well. Publishing RSD alignment information on the learner evidence record, which I'll talk a little bit more about, was a big step forward. But Edalex, so our company, wanted to know if we could do a little bit deeper integration of RSDs into Credentialate. So Credentialate is one of our platforms, as Margo discussed, and it produces a learner evidence record, which details the skills that a learner has achieved. And we were putting RSD alignments, and still are putting RSD alignments onto our learner evidence record. But after some exploration, we thought, yeah, it is definitely possible for a deeper integration of RSDs into Credentialate. So we now have that on our roadmap, which is really cool. And it's something we'll explore later on. We also have clients who have open Aquila institutions, and the openRSD platform being based on open Aquila can be integrated with current open Aquila clients instances. So institutions, basically what I'm saying here is institutions with open Aquila can integrate with openRSD. They can look up and embed RSDs into their learning content that they've currently got in open Aquila, and they can share RSDs between their platform and the openRSD repository. So that's something really cool we're looking at on our roadmap as well. The other really important question we pondered during the collaborative, and Margo has gone into this a little bit more, is how do we onboard other people into this ecosystem? So the institutions, the learners, the employers, how do we onboard them as to the value and usefulness of RSDs, because it's so new in our ecosystem here. And as we thought about this, we thought about, well, what do people want to know? And our eureka moment came when we pondered the big question that keeps surfacing in all our discussions around skills, and that is, what is the standard definition of a skill? People want to know what a skill is. It's a buzzword sometimes, and they're not sure exactly what it means. And as recently as this week, I've heard that question voiced by employers trying to understand micro-credentials presented on a resume or a learner evidence record. So through our collaborative work, we actually got the answer to that question, and now we talk about it all the time. And the answer really is that the RSDs provide the standard for defining a skill. They give a skill structure, context, and meaning, and provide the common language that people in the skills ecosystem are looking for. And without our understanding and our work in the collaborative, I don't think we could have been as succinct as that. Next slide, please, Christian. So RSD utility is a little bit more on the theme of how we use them in the real world. So for RSDs to be viable and a readily accepted tool in a job seeker's toolkit, we realized we had to help people understand why RSDs are important and why they should be investing significant time in creating these little skills data packages full of information and weaving them into skills design and credential delivery. So we're explaining the why of RSDs in our conversations, and the whys being RSDs provide a timely opportunity to introduce skill standardization in Australia across our education sectors and employment systems who are crying out for a standard in skills definition. RSDs also provide value and meaning behind the skill name and statement. Otherwise, the skill might just be a word that could be open to interpretation. And we know that the data in RSDs is human readable, so it's easy to understand when you look at an RSD, what it contains and what it means. And also, of course, it's machine readable, so everybody can understand what the author intends to convey when they publish or issue a particular skill. We're also promoting the how. How do you adopt RSDs into your practices. And we're doing that by demonstrating the value of designing and embedding RSDs into learning outcomes through some of our recent use cases and research, providing free user guides, which Margo has spoken about, and I think the links are in the chat. So short videos, some materials on our website, just as much as we can do to explain how you could use RSDs, why they're useful. And then, of course, we're letting people get hands-on to experience RSDs through our openRSD platform. So they can log in for free, experience browsing, create their own RSDs. We support that. So we've also got support if people need some help with that. So it's easy to access. I hope it's fairly intuitive and people can get in there and get their hands dirty. Next slide, please. So that brings us to the openRSD project. Margo's already spoken a bit about that, so I won't labour the point too much here about what it is and how we got there. But I will say this, during the OSN Collaborative, one of the questions we asked and had to answer for ourselves was why we should build a new RSD platform, given that there was a fabulous built-for-purpose OSMET already available, obviously open access. So, metaphorically speaking, we didn't want to find ourselves in Jurassic Park where we built it and then went, why? Did we really think about that? However, next slide, please, Christian. Creating the RSD repository for ourselves allowed us to explore a few things that we really wanted to dig into, and that was things like creating RSDs and collections aligned to Australian professional and educational frameworks. That had a lot to do with the taxonomies, so we wanted to be able to put customized taxonomies into our RSD fields, and I'll show you that when I give you a little bit of a demo in a moment. We wanted to explore RSD use cases for Australia and see how that might translate into some platform design for RSDs. Scaling of RSDs, permanence of the platform. So we were looking at things like an open platform, of course, that can scale up for worldwide use and can be used by our own clients and everybody else. Federated searching. So we also wanted to have a look at being able to federate with OSMET. And that's something we're still looking at doing. And giving existing Open Aquila clients, which I've mentioned before, the ability to integrate with openRSDs and pull RSDs into their curriculum content, which gave them a skills-focused content management ethos. And that's something we're working with our clients on at the moment. And of course, multi-tenancy. So one of the things that we wanted to be able to do was allow our openRSD clients to create their own RSD contribution wizards, which means they basically get bespoke RSD forms with bespoke RSD fields. And that doesn't mean that we're taking the RSD standard and just doing whatever we want. It would still obviously comply to the standard, but some clients might like an extra field to use for internal use to be able to filter on. So things like that. And so openRSD was born, and it had its official launch on the 26th of May. So I'll just pop you onto the next slide there, Christian, and continuing our little dinosaur theme. openRSDs are here. I'll screen share and give you a quick tour of openRSD. Christian, I'll just press the share button and I'm now the presenter. Can you see my openRSD instance? No. Okay, let me have a look how to do that. I think you should be able to now. Yes, I'm sharing the right screen. Okay, good. So what I wanted to do is just a very quick tour. You can see I'm already logged into openRSD here. And if I search, you can see that we have heaps and heaps of rich skill descriptors in here now. And most of that is thanks to our clients and the WGU libraries, which they have allowed us to have access to and to pull into. I'll say it's the ones that WGU have actually published for for worldwide use. So they've allowed us to pull these in and reference them in openRSD. The one thing I wanted to show you was the contribution form. You can see we have some bespoke contribution forms here already. I'll go to a standard one. The required fields for RSDs are all in here, the standard fields. What I wanted to show you that might be of interest is the metadata for occupations, categories, alignments, certifications. I won't go into all of them, but I will show you just quickly what I meant by bespoke taxonomies. So for example, in occupations, we give people, contributors, the choice of using ANZ SCO classification occupations, ESCO, or ONET. So we have a few taxonomies behind this field to choose from. And if I go in and I have a look to select some terms, you can see the taxonomies appearing here. If none of those are suitable or you've got something else you'd like to use, manual entry opens the key for you to be able to put in whatever taxonomy references you like. And we've done that throughout. So certifications, we have the AQF, and categories, we have a couple of frameworks from around the world that you can use to look at categories. So that's kind of all I really wanted to show you, but it's one of the important things why we investigated doing our own openRSD platform, our own RSD platform. And that was so we could bring in taxonomies, customize things for Australian use and for any of our clients' use. So I'll stop screen sharing, but yes, you can check out openRSD. I'm sure there'll be a link in the chat. Okay, so looking at the time, I'll just quickly go through one of our other things. So next slide, please, Christian. Some of the micro challenges we had, Margo mentioned them, and it's things like access to skills data. So there's some wonderfully detailed and highly refined skills data locked away in government websites and downloadable PDF documents, which aren't really machine readable. So one of our challenges is to liberate this information, and we're going to start with the AQTF, so the Australian Qualifications and Training Framework, which we're working on right now, to see if we can pull that into an RSD format. Another challenge is how do we provide utility for learners, employers, and others in the skills ecosystem through the use of RSDs? For learners, it might look like integrating openRSD with badging agents. So we can push RSDs from openRSD to badging agents. And one of the challenges there is locating integration information for those badging agents. So we're currently looking at that. And for employers, it might look like generating job descriptions based on RSDs. And we've heard that from a couple of employers that they'd like to look into how to do that. Next slide, please, Christian. So our roadmap, as I mentioned, we're thinking around integrating openRSD and Credentialate. So we have a full integration experience between the two platforms. Converting the thousands of workplace skills and contextual information from the AQTF to RSD formats, so this data can be shared and associated directly to learning content and outcomes. And that would be really amazing if we could do that. And so we're definitely looking at that. And looking into the application of CTDL data standards across our RSDs in openRSD and potentially to our other credentialing resources. I will close off there because I know Christian would like to have some question time, but I'll leave it on the slide. This is the very busy Learn to Earn journey. And Margo, I don't know if you wanted to say anything about this.
I just thought that there should be a quiz on this particular diagram for all concerned. Yes, it's too busy. We just wanted to say that we thought about the journey, and this was part of our mapping process and roadmap process. So thank you. Christian, if I could just have a couple more slides and then we'll stop talking. I wanted to just say, whilst we have been heavily involved in looking at how we can scale RSDs through our own technology for our local region, it's a bit more than that. And so, we are firmly in the belief of, skills having a common schema, a common language, and the benefit that we can see for our region. So we're not just involved in the tech, but we're also involved in the movement, if that makes sense. We had a wonderful skills meetup just this week in Melbourne, where we had government policy, senior education administrators, and those actually in the weeds of skills development, like Engineers Australia and other training organisations, actually in the room together to talk about skills. And you know, we are hoping to continue those skills meetups, both at the state level, but also be involved at the national level. So I've mentioned that there is a National Jobs and Skills Summit coming up on the 1st of September. We won't be involved in that one because that's very high level political, but to have an associated event that leads off from the outcomes of that. We also have a number of innovative pilots at the industry level, both from a credentialing perspective and an accreditation perspective for organisations. So we are firmly involved in the movement. Next slide, please, Christian. I'm going to leave you with a particularly Australian slide. Those of you or those Aussies in the audience today will recognise where this meme is from. It's basically an iconic 90s movie called The Castle. And one of the scenes in talking about Indigenous land rights was around it's the vibe, right? It's just the vibe. And that is a very classic statement in Australia. The Castle in and of itself, that movie is actually a masterclass in social commentary. Now, without meanness or judgment or anything else like that, The Castle speaks to, you know, many of the issues that we actually still face, right? You know, social and economic mobility, Indigenous land rights, immigration, and much, much more. It's such a mirror on our social flaws. And the issue, not the issue, but, you know, the observation could be made that we are still dealing with all of those, right? So everything that it was highlighting when it was made is actually still in existence. So leaving you with the very Australian comment of, it's a vibe, but actually it's a movement, and it's a global movement. And we at Edalex are really choosing to be part of that movement and the vibe around skills enablement at scale. So I thank you so much for listening, and yeah, we'll turn you back to Christian.
Thank you so very much. This has been an absolutely incredible conversation today, or at least a presentation, and we'd like to invite that conversation to happen now. I know I've seen a few questions pop up in the chat, and I'd like to turn it over now to my colleague, Christina Caldwell, who is our Open Skills Network Community Manager, to facilitate this Q&A.
Chris Coleman had a question. Is there any talk with HR tech companies like Workday to bring in OSN skills?
So I think that's like an OSN question, right?
Yeah, I guess that would be. So we have been speaking with Workday, and more so on the WGU side with regard to skills. And so we don't have a response yet, but we can absolutely follow up with you, Chris, and let you know how that is progressing. But that's a great question. Thank you. And yes, we are at the beginning of talks with Workday. All right, then we had a question from Joshua Marks. Did you explore Open Salt for managing full RSDs frameworks? And then he also put a note. Open Salt is multi-tenant. It is also IMS case certified. And this is to all the panelists.
Yeah, and that question popped up specifically when Margo and Melinda, you guys were talking about the formation and sort of the background development of openRSD.
Thank you, Christian.
Okay, so as Margo was saying, we didn't look at other platforms because as we were talking about RSDs, we just naturally looked at OpenAquila, and the reason we did was because of the power and the capabilities of OpenAquila. And as Margo said, the metadata management capabilities of OpenEquella just stood out to us. So because we had a platform in-house, we hadn't actually explored other options. Margo, did you want to say anything more on that?
Yeah, mainly because, and it was because this came out of the collaborative projects, really. And so we did turn to what we had in-house. But I hear your point around the Open Salt and the IMS case standards. It's absolutely something that we are now exploring, right? I know it's kind of a reverse engineering issue, but we're cognizant of all of the IMS standards. We're cognizant of CTDL, and all of those are things that we are looking at in the immediate future. For us, it's a resourcing issue too, right? So we are wanting to do what's best for the community, absolutely. So I guess that's a long answer to saying, yes, we're cognizant of them, and we are looking to how we can be compliant into the future, most definitely. Our main, just before we go on, but what we really wanted to do in using OpenEquella was to get RSDs out to the Australian environment as quickly as we possibly could. And we thought that by using OpenEquella, which was a platform and a functionality that people were already used to, that lift might be a little bit easier. And so that's where we went to first, if that helps with the explanations.
Thank you, Margo. Our next question is from Jeffrey Guerin. What about multilingual for OSMIT and openRSD? We can start with OSMIT.
Yeah, so I think that's a great question and something that, we could certainly explore with interested partners. I think right now, getting it off the ground and with our current use cases, we were not considering that in the immediate, just getting started. But of course, that's always something that would come up and that we would want to do to continue for access and availability.
Great. And openRSD?
I see Dan has already jumped in there and answered that in the chat. So yes, RSD is fully internationalized and can be used in any language. And I should have mentioned before, that was one of the reasons we also looked at that as our RSD platform, because we were considering worldwide sharing and other languages.
Yeah, and just to add some color there, OpenEquella is a global platform and we manage and service that globally. So it was one of the first thoughts that we had around that was the language issue. The other thing, and I'll preempt a question that is in the chat too around open source. Yeah, openRSD is open source. It's based on the OSMIT code, and it's also based on OpenEquella, which is also open source. So yes to all questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Melinda and Margo and Melissa. Since we're coming up on time, we have about 1.5 minutes left. We will follow up with the rest of the questions, and we will do that offline. We will turn it back over to Christian to wrap things up. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. And thank you, panelists.
And thank you again, panelists, so much for being here today and sharing all of the work that WGU is doing and Edalex. It's exciting stuff, and this really is an important conversation. The openness of open skills, as Margo was saying, the open source tools of Aquella and OSMIT and openRSD are so important to being inclusive to everyone to truly be a part of this conversation and to participate fully and equally within it. And with that, we invite you to our next OSN Showcase, and that's going to be September 15th. We're going to be exploring our own skill development in vacationing for August, and we invite you all to do the same. So we look forward to seeing you in September, and thank you so much for being here today, and thank you, panelists, for sharing your expertise and your time with us. We greatly appreciate it. Until next time, bye-bye.